Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, you're going to understand how to build and architect intelligent and safe AI systems entirely on n8n. We are going to go beyond the basic integrations and build an AI system which validates the input, assesses the output, detects the risk, and escalates accordingly. We are going to be using a production-ready thinking model on no-code tool, but the automation which I'm going to show you, that is not production-ready. If you want to know why, stay with me till the end and I'll say you exactly why it is not a production-ready automation. Do you see this? Do you see my Slack interface? These are the messages which I have received recently, and these messages were sent directly by my automation. My automation basically identified a high risk message given by a user and escalated it to me. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I build it. You see this workflow? This is the workflow for my AI therapist agent. And in this workflow, there are 4 main sessions. 1. A trigger node. 2. An assessment node. 3. A system to warn the user that they have detected a certain highly risky message. 4. The response writing node, and last and final unit, a self-checking unit. Let me explain this to you via diagram. So I built a personal therapist agent. Okay, so as I said, this is the input, or rather trigger. Whenever a user gives any kind of input into the chat input, the trigger activates and this whole workflow gets into action. Once the trigger activates, I have included a set node which ensures that only the response or the input provided by the user is detected by rest of the flow. After that comes the core assessment of the input. I've included this node just so my automation can give a dynamic response. What this node does is that it analyzes the input given by the user and provides a deeply psychological assessment depending on the input provided. It identifies the core issue faced by the user and outlines an appropriate response which could elevate the user's mood and decrease the psychological pressure on him. This node doesn't write any kind of response. It gives a core assessment of the input provided by the user and gives an outline of how the response should be structured. If in this node a risk is identified, then what happens next is this flow is activated where the information is provided to the owner or reported to the owner, basically, as you saw in my Slack panel where there were multiple reports that my automation has detected highly risky message. Okay, and next, if any such risk is not identified, then that code assessment and outline of response is sent to the next node, that's the frame response node. What happens in this node is that this frame response node understands the outline of the response provided by the core assessment node, understands the core assessment of the input provided by the user, and frames a proper message which is to be sent to the user again. Once this step is done, a fact check node is also included. But before this, I forgot to mention one thing. In this report to owner, even when a highly risky message is detected and reported to owner, the message still continues. The flow does not end there. This report, which was sent to the owner, is then sent to the frame response node and continues rest of the way. In the next node comes the fact check plus security check. Sometimes AI can hallucinate. It can give some misleading information, or the statement provided by it might actually provoke the user to take some unforeseen action. So I've created this another node which checks the response provided by the user, understands the core assessment of the input provided by the user, correlates them, and gives a security check where either it passes or it fails. If it fails, then the next flow happens is that it is sent back to the core assessment where this process starts again so that a proper input can be framed and sent to the user. Once fact check is done, and if the fact check gives a past position to the response framed by the previous node, then that response is sent to the user, that is response to chat. Though I have made some changes in the automation, this is basically the base flow of the automation. What I usually do is that before I start building any kind of automation, I first draw a diagram of pictographic representation of the flow or the logic of the automation. So this is the logic which I made before making the personal therapist agent. So now let's go back to the workflow. Back to n8n. So as you can see, this is the entire flow of the AI agent built for personal therapist. This is the trigger node, as I said already. Whenever a person inputs some kind of message here, it is shown here as output, and this trigger acts as a key to begin the automation. And whenever this trigger is activated, the whole of the automation gets into action. This is the edit field, or rather the set node, which I made to ensure that only the information provided by the user is used in rest of the flow. Let me just show it to you. So if I put hey, this trigger activated, and well, we got a message, chat input, hey. The next node, what I did was that, let me just pin it so that I don't need to restart again. This is the core assessment node. Adding this to your flow is very simple. Just click on tab and select the AI agent, and you get this. This is the one which I included here. Let's look into it a bit. This is basically the prompt, or rather the message which is sent by the user. This is the system prompt which I wrote for my personal therapist agent. These are the instructions, or then comes output format, examples, guidelines, and highly necessary information. Once this is done, comes an if. Okay, an if node. If node is something extremely special, and it is a basic node in n8n. What this node does is that, well, most of you must know what if else does. So if else is basically a system or a conditioning node where it says that if X happens, then A happens. If X does not happen, then Y happens. So this is that. I've given it the condition that if output in the JSON output provided by the code assessment node, a highly risk case is identified. If the message starts with this, then and only then an output should be sent to the user or the owner of the automation. This node is basically an AI agent which writes the message to be sent to the user. I've used Slack to provide the warning to the owner. If no high risk is identified, then the flow continues as is to the next response, that is the frame response node. What happens here is that it takes the output provided by the core assessment node, the actual message provided by the user in the chat input node. Here, yes, this is the one. Okay, and what this does is that it frames a response with respect to both of them depending on the system message which I have provided. This is also a pretty long one. I have given it some input context, instructions, then examples, requirements, guidelines, and all. That's the task of this specific node, and this node also activates in the other case where a message is sent to the user, else everything is the same. What happens next is that once the response is ready, I have created a fact and security check node, which checks the response created by the frame response node, takes in the input from the core assessment node, and gives a proper analysis of the response, whether it passes the check or does it fail. Well, that's what it checks here. Prompt here, I gave it 3 resources: the actual response, the user message, and the core assessment of the user message made by the previous agent. This is basically the user message. User message is something which you send to the AI. You can consider it to be a variable. It changes depending on the condition. A system message is a constant. It stays the same no matter the number of times you run it. And this is the system message which I have provided to this node. You can see I've given it some critical guidelines, some safety checks, what to check, what not to check, how to validate the response, and I've given it plenty of instructions, the output format, and if you go further down, there are a few examples as well. And this is a system node which I have created for this specific task, that is for fact and security check of the response created by a create response node. Once a check is done, an edit node basically captures hold of the analysis made by the security node and sends it to an if node once again. In this node, I have created the condition that if the fact security check says that there is a threat level in this response, if the response is risky, then a loop continues and goes back to frame response node where the response is framed once again with respect to the reasoning given by the security check agent. Once that response is created, it is sent back to fact plus security check node, and then the process continues. But if the fact and security check passed the message and said there is no problem, the threat level of the response is quite low, then the process continues. In the next step, there is another edit node which captures hold of the frame response, or rather the response framed by this node. Okay, and that node is sent back to the user. I've used the no operation do nothing node to signal this is the end of the flow, sending into the flow as a user response. You may also see another node here, that is I have named it Superbrain. I've used a single API, a single OpenAI API to connect with all of these 4 agents. So let me show you how to actually connect the OpenAI account. Basically what you do is that when you create an OpenAI node, you need to first set your credentials. I've created one already, but let me just show it to you again. Go to your interface here, click on the pencil tab, and you will open this page basically. So now that we have understood the logic behind the flow and how to build this logic, let us do some testing and see if it actually works. So this is the message which I'll be inputting into my user node, and I expect the flow to be triggered and I get an empathetic and good depending on the circumstances given by the core assessment. So let's test it out. Now that the trigger has been activated, you see that the entire of the flow gets into action. It seems that there was no risk found in this message. So I received a message back. I hear that you're feeling anxious about your presentation and that your mind keeps replaying things going wrong. That makes complete sense. When something important is coming up, it's natural for worries to take up space like that. And yes, I'm not reading the entire message, but you get the sense, right? So this is what happened. Now let us look at another use case, highly risky use case. Okay, this is the next one. The trigger was activated, the chat was initiated, a warning is to be sent to the user now. Let us check, did I actually receive a warning? Yes, today I received the warning. Absolutely. Risk warning, high risk user detected. I had identified the problem. Seems that I was exceeding the OpenAI limit. Now, I think I solved it. So let's test it again. And as you can see, I received a new response right now. I'm really glad you reached out. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed by pain, despair, and that everything feels heavy. Many people in similar situations feel trapped. And yes, this was the response which I was provided by this agent. This was second use case. A risky message. As soon as a message was received by the input, the entire flow was triggered. It woke up into action, sent owner of the workflow, that is me, a response stating that a high risk warning, a high risk user was identified, which means that automation has received a highly risky message from the user. And then a response was framed. The response was checked by the AI agent itself to see if it is a good response or a bad one. Next, the security check said it's okay, pass it over. The if node passed the response to the edit field where I captured the exact response and I ended the flow and I received the message. Did you notice something? There is no node saying respond to chat. Well, that's because within the trigger node in the add field, you will see something known as response mode. This decides how you're going to send a response within the chat input. And I have selected when last node finishes. Well, that's what happened here. Now coming back to the initial question where I said this is not a production grade automation. Well, that's because there is no memory. I have not included memory here. If we were to include a memory and give every chat a unique ID and link it to the memory such that any message sent by that unique ID or the person holding that unique ID is stored, then a message would be sent to the owner stating that such person has sent such message. These are the contact details. Contact them immediately. If we add those things here, only then will this automation become a production grade automation. Though there may be some more additional features which should be included in this automation to make this a production ready one. So in this video, you understood the workflow which I used, the logic behind this work, the build of the automation, how I built it, and how I tested it. And you also got to know how to actually generate an OpenAI API key and use it within the automation. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, press the like button, hide this video up, subscribe to the channel to watch more automation related videos. That's it for today. My name is Varun, over and out.